Good morning, it's January 16th. This is To My Little Friends. Well, the Biden campaign slogan is Bidenomics, and Uncle Joe wants you to understand that it's working for you. He points to the stock market and low unemployment rates and lower gas prices and tell you these are the reason to vote for him. But what Biden and his campaign won't talk about and they don't want you to focus on is what I would call Bideninflation. The reality of the situation is since Biden took office, we've seen almost 17% inflation. When he took office, inflation stood at 1.4%. Inflation has now stayed above the Federal Reserve's 2% target for 35 consecutive months. And I've repeatedly made the point that the place the average American sees its inflation is in the grocery store. Prices have soared and show no indication of coming down. People are having to make some hard decisions on what to buy and what to do without. And the double whammy, particularly for working class Americans, is that wages have not even come close to matching inflation, and in fact, they've actually dropped. Average hourly earnings for all employees dropped 2.5% in December from $11.39 to $11.10 in January. When Biden assumed office, normal nominal salary increases at the fastest pace in years. American workers are now worse off than they were when the president took office. In summary, the prices have increased by 16.6%, while real wages have declined by 2.5%. Meaning Americans have taken a 2.5% pay cut under the current administration. To put it more differently, people now need 19.1% more income than they had in January 21 to maintain their current standard of living. When a recent poll asked the public what the important economic issues were, inflation came in at number one and the cost of groceries in second. Now, this might not be a major concern to the liberal elites that work in the White House, but to the average American, it will more than likely dictate their vote. When I first came to Washington in January of 1977 to work as a staff member in the U.S. Senate, Jimmy Carter had just been elected as a president, and Democrats had control of the House and Senate as well. But it was an ill-fated presidency as Carter failed to get a hold on the economic problems facing the nation. Inflation and high interest rates were rocking the country, and we have what was called the misery index, where they were added inflation and interest rates together. And it's become fashionable of late to compare U.S. President Joe Biden in 2023 to U.S. President Jimmy Carter in 79. And just as the events of 79 doomed Carter's re-election hopes the following year, developments in 2023 are said to have effectively sunk Biden's term for a second term this November. Most obviously, both Carter and Biden confronted a demoralizing inflation problem. But the Carter-era inflation was far worse. In November 1979, a year prior to the election, consumer price inflation in the United States was running at 12.5%. In the 12 months ending November 23, in contrast, CPI was at 3.1%. But inflation does remain a political liability for Biden, regardless of whether the phenomenon is now largely in the rearview mirror. Second, Biden, like Carter before him, has given the Federal Reserve free rein to tackle the problem. Carter selected Paul Volcker to chair the U.S. Federal Reserve Board, largely for Volcker's inflation-fighting credentials, in full knowledge that the new chair would jack up interest rates. Despite warning from his political advisor, Burt Lance, that Volcker's appointment would doom the president, Carter let Volcker go about his business. Carter's hands-off approach during the run-up to an election was quite different from that of some of his predecessors, and particularly Richard Nixon. All of these economic woes have forced Biden to base a campaign on, quote, saving democracy, as he looks backward to January 6th as his campaign theme. He mentions his likely opponent, Donald Trump, over and over in his speeches. He has no strong economic record to run on, so he has to run against his opponent as opposed to running on his record. In the end, that strategy might be his downfall because more and more voters remember what inflation was under Trump and what the price in the grocery store were under Trump. They remember lower gas prices and lower electric bills. The working class voters are not buying the constant attack on their appliances. They're not sold on buying an electric car that's out of their price range. In many cases, they don't have a garage where they can charge the vehicle. But these are basic mantras for the progressives that dominate the Biden administration. Middle America, and by that I especially mean the Rust Belt, is not buying Bidenomics, but they're certainly well of Bideninflation. And that might be the death knell to Joe Biden winning a second term, just as those factors doomed Jimmy Carter. The election this year will come down to the key swing states, and that is the polling numbers you should be watching. This is where the rubber meets the road, and the numbers are not looking good for Biden. According to a recent New York Times Siena poll, they look like this. In Pennsylvania, Trump's up 4, 48 to 44. In Michigan, Trump is up 5 points at 48-43. In Arizona, Trump's at +5 at 49 to 44. In Georgia, Trump is +6 at 49-43. Nevada, he's up 10, 52 to 42. Only in Wisconsin, another swing state, does Biden hold a slim 2-point advantage. And recent polling shows both DeSantis and Nikki Haley ahead of Biden nationally. Now, the rest of the states are fairly predictable, but it'll be those that hold Biden would lose in November. It's been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.